What if the medical file that was meant to save your future was actually the exact same document used to restrict your freedom the very day you turned 18?
Yeah, it's a terrifying thought.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking a really hard look at the invisible economic scaffolding that, surrounds neurodivergence.
Right.
We have this brief but just incredibly potent excerpt from Dr. Jaime Hoerricks, and it's titled Priced Out of Personhood When the Child Ages Out. And our mission for you today is to take a single, profound concept from this text and just examine it from every possible angle.
It's quite a task.
It is. We are tracing how the market and, well, society, by extension, fundamentally changes how it treats autism based purely on a person's age.
Yeah, and it's a text that really strips away the illusion that our social systems are, purely benevolent. Dr. Hoerricks is forcing us to examine this completely jarring transition from childhood to adulthood.
Right.
And it asks us to look at what happens when a human being is no longer viewed as a potential investment, but instead gets managed as a permanent cost.
We are jumping right into the deep end here, starting exactly where the source material begins, which is with childhood, and how the market instantly responds to a diagnosis. And, the text does not hold back.
No, not at all. Dr. Hoerricks introduces a really brilliant but deeply unsettling concept right in the opening lines, which is the autistic panic economy.
The panic economy.
Exactly. And to understand the rest of the text, we really have to look at how that panic actually operates. Because in childhood, autism is framed through a very specific high-stress lens.
Oh, absolutely.
The market treats it as an absolute emergency. It is framed as tragic, it's undeniably expensive, but the defining characteristic of this childhood phase is that the child is viewed as salvageable.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because that word salvageable, it just carries a massive amount of weight.
It does.
It implies that a human being is, broken, sure, but can be restored to some sort of, factory setting if everyone just works hard enough.
That's the exact expectation, yeah.
And the mechanics of this panic economy, as described in the text, they're exhausting just to read about, let alone actually live through. Parents are actively pushed to chase these developmental milestones.
Right, it's nonstop.
They are constantly bombarded with messaging about catching these fleeting windows of opportunity.
Yeah, and think about what that actually looks like in practice. You have parents who are told that if they don't act right this very second, their child's future is effectively lost.
Which is terrifying.
Completely. So they end up paying out of pocket for, 40 hours a week of behavioral therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy.
Yeah.
They're driving all across town to specialists, fighting insurance companies, and meticulously building these extensive medical and educational records.
Right. Because they have to prove they need the help.
Exactly. And that urgency, that is the entire engine of the economy. Because if you tell a parent they only have a really narrow window to salvage their kid, they will spend whatever it takes.
They'll remortgage the house.
Right. They'll empty their retirement accounts. The market literally requires that panic to function.
To me, it sounds like the market is treating the child almost exactly like a venture capital project.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. You have a distressed asset.
Yeah.
The child is explicitly framed as a problem, but, and this is the key to the venture capital analogy, it's a problem with a possible return on investment.
Yes.
The parents in the state are injecting massive amounts of capital, time, therapies, all of it, into this distressed asset with the belief that they can, turn it around for a societal profit down the line.
A payoff, essentially.
Exactly. The goal is an IPO where the kid is completely indistinguishable from their peers.
But wait, let me push back on this cynical view for a second here.
Sure.
Because a lot of parents genuinely just want to help their kids navigate a world that wasn't built for them.
Of course.
And a lot of these therapies do teach valuable life skills, right? So is Dr. Hoerricks really arguing that all this childhood intervention is just like a grift? No, it's really crucial to separate the intent of the parents from the design of the system. Dr. Hoerricks is not attacking parents for wanting to support their children.
Okay.
Nor is the text saying that all therapy is inherently useless. The critique is aimed squarely at the market incentives themselves.
I see.
Yeah, the text points out that the system revolves around what it calls money in the maybe.
Wow. Money in the maybe.
Yeah.
That is such a striking phrase.
It really is, because the market is selling a very specific, highly profitable product here. It's selling the promise that if you just, apply enough therapy,
Right.
if you demand enough behavioral compliance from the child, and if you gather enough documentation, all of this might eventually produce an acceptable, normalized future.
It's all about the might.
Exactly. The market doesn't guarantee a cure, but it absolutely monetizes the maybe.
And the text refers to that product as structured hope, which, I mean, when you look closely at the actual mechanics of it, is a
Yeah.
pretty dark concept.
It is.
Because hope isn't just an organic feeling of optimism in this economy. It is an industrialized product being sold on like an installment plan.
That's exactly right.
It is highly structured. There are billing codes for it. There is a literal price tag attached to every single milestone and intervention.
The entire economy of childhood autism, at least as presented in the source, relies on maintaining this state of expensive, structured anticipation.
Yeah?
You are funding the potential for a normalized adult. And that really brings us to the core tension of the text.
Which is
What happens when the biological clock runs out on that, maybe?
right. What happens when this venture capital project hits its absolute deadline? Because building directly from this intense, highly capitalized investment phase of childhood, we pivot to the arrival of adulthood.
Yeah.
And this is where the absolute absurdity of our bureaucratic structures really comes into focus.
Yeah.
Because turning 18 is not, it's not like a magical switch that flips at midnight.
No, definitely not.
Human brain chemistry does not fundamentally alter at 11:59 p.m. on the eve of birthday. The neurological reality of that individual is exactly the same on Tuesday as an adult as it was on Monday as a child.
Biology certainly doesn't care about a calendar, but bureaucracy absolutely does.
Right.
The market treats the 18th birthday like a sheer cliff face.
So if this whole venture capital model depends on an eventual payoff, what happens on the kid's 18th birthday when the market decides the investment phase is officially over? What exactly do they become overnight?
Well, what's fascinating here is how Dr. Hoerricks describes this specific transition. Adulthood does not arrive with a resolution to the panic.
It doesn't end.
No. You don't age out of the pediatric system and suddenly everyone takes a breath and says, well, okay, the panic is over, we did our best.
Right, that would be too easy.
Instead, the text states there's a profound shift in grammar. The underlying rules of engagement completely change.
A shift in grammar. I want to linger on that for a second because, grammar dictates the rules of how things relate to one another in a sentence, or in this case, in society.
Yeah.
If the grammar changes, the entire relationship between the autistic individual and the society around them has been rewritten without their consent.
And we really have to look at why that grammar shifts so abruptly. Because it's not a mystery, it's an economic reality.
Yeah.
In childhood, the funding streams are entirely different. You have the educational system, which is legally mandated to provide schooling.
Right.
You have pediatric medical funds aimed at development. That is all investment capital. But at 18 or 21, depending on the local system, those entitlements just vanish.
They dry up.
The cure money is gone. The individual is suddenly transferred over to adult social care systems, which are chronically underfunded, heavily waitlisted, and entirely defensive in how they operate.
So going back to our venture capital analogy, adulthood is the moment the market decides the startup has failed to IPO. The investment window is closed. So the market just writes off the distressed asset and starts looking at how to minimize the ongoing holding costs.
That is the exact mechanism. And Dr. Hoerricks provides a stark, really defining contrast for this new grammar.
What is it?
The individual who was previously viewed by the market as a salvageable child is now suddenly viewed as a documented liability.
A documented liability.
Yes.
Wow. The goalposts haven't just moved, they have been completely dismantled and replaced with a toll booth.
Exactly. Because in childhood, the panic was about funding the potential for normalization. In adulthood, the panic shifts entirely to managing a permanent cost.
Right.
The market stops looking at the individual as a project with a potential upside and starts treating them as a sheer ongoing deficit to the state and to society.
And because they are now viewed as a documented liability, we really have to explore the documented part of that phrase. Because this is the trap, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Think about all those records, all those IEP files, all those medical notes. Every single behavioral intervention that was so furiously gathered during childhood to justify the money and the maybe.
All the data collected during the phase of structured hope.
Exactly. All of it.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly kind of disturbing.
Yep.
Imagine a 10-year-old having a severe meltdown in a classroom. Maybe the lights are too bright or the room is too loud. It's a sensory issue, right?
Right.
But the therapist documents it in the file as noncompliance and aggressive behavior, because using those specific severe medical terms is literally the only way to justify billing the insurance company for more therapy hours.
And the parents agree.
Right, they agree because they are told this is how you get the kid the help they need. This is how you play the game.
It was all framed as necessary for the maybe. You have to document the deficit to fund the salvation.
Right. But fast forward 8 years. That 10-year-old is now 18. The investment phase is over. An adult services board is reviewing this person's file to determine what kind of life they are allowed to lead. And they read that exact same therapist's note from 8 years ago.
Yep.
But instead of saying, oh, let's get this person's sensory support, they read history of noncompliance and aggressive behavior. And they use that exact phrase to deny the 18-year-old the right to live independently.
Exactly.
They use it to force them into a highly restrictive group home. How does a file that was originally built entirely under the guise of care, meant to support and salvage, become something so incredibly dark?
It happens because the fundamental economic incentive has flipped. Dr. Hoerricks writes what is arguably the most chilling line in the entire excerpt, honestly.
What is it?
When the market stops selling hope, the record is often repurposed for sorting. The author explains how the file itself becomes a weapon.
The file becomes a weapon.
Yeah.
That is just, it's a devastating realization.
It is.
The parents handed over all this deeply vulnerable data, meticulously documenting every awkward phase, every struggle, every bad day their child ever had, completely believing they were buying a better future.
Yeah, but once adulthood hits and the market decides the maybe didn't pan out, that the individual wasn't successfully normalized, that exact same documentation is repurposed.
It turned against them.
Right. The system looks at this massive, decade-long file of deficits, which, was artificially inflated to secure pediatric funding in the first place, and uses it to categorize, to sort, and to manage the individual as a liability.
It's the ultimate bait and switch.
Absolutely.
The paperwork meant to open doors during childhood is now the exact same paperwork used to build fences in adulthood.
Yeah.
It determines whether you are allowed to sign your own lease, what kind of job training programs you get sorted into, or whether you get placed under a legal guardianship that strips away your basic civil rights. It literally prices them out of their own personhood.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a profound truth about the bureaucracies we build.
Yeah.
We often like to comfort ourselves by thinking that adult services are just tragically underfunded or that there's simply a lack of societal awareness.
Right, like it's just an accident of the system.
Exactly. But Dr. Hoerricks is arguing something much more systemic and intentional. The autistic panic economy never actually vanishes.
It just changes shape.
The economy doesn't disappear, it just stops funding hope. It redirects all that capital, all that bureaucratic energy, into funding the management of liabilities.
So the sorting mechanism essentially becomes the new economy.
Yes. The bureaucracy required to assess, categorize, house, and manage these liabilities is an industry unto itself. And its raw material is the paperwork generated during childhood.
It's sorting humans into bins of risk and cost.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens the very second the return on investment clock runs out.
It's brutal.
We've traced the entire life cycle of this autistic panic economy today, and man, it is a heavy journey.
It really is.
We started in the highly monetized frenzy of childhood interventions, where the individual is treated as a distressed asset being pumped full of structured hope.
Yeah.
And then we walked straight off the cliff of the 18th birthday, where that shift in grammar abruptly turns a salvageable child into a documented liability.
And we saw the specific mechanism of how that happens, the very tools of supposed salvation. The diagnoses, the therapy notes, the educational files are transformed into instruments of restriction. The record is repurposed for sorting.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? Why should you care about this specific economic framework if, say, you don't work in pediatric care or adult services?
Good question.
You should care because this text forces us to look incredibly closely at how economic incentives can entirely dictate human value.
Right.
It shows us how a market, driven by panic and profit, can arbitrarily decide who gets help and who gets sorted. It reveals that when society views people purely through the lens of investment and liability, personhood itself becomes conditional.
It's not guaranteed.
No, it becomes something you have to constantly earn the right to keep. and something you can be priced out of the moment you stop offering a potential return.
It's a reminder that the systems designed to care for the most vulnerable among us are rarely neutral. They are driven by economic grammar, and unless we understand that grammar, we can't begin to change how the system operates.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over, building on that terrifying concept of the weaponized file.
Okay.
Think about the absolute worst, most difficult phase of your own childhood. The mistakes you made, the emotional meltdowns you had, the times you completely failed to meet expectations.
We all have them.
Right. Now imagine if every single one of those moments had been meticulously documented, diagnosed, and filed away by a panic-driven market.
Wow.
How would you fare today if a bureaucracy decided you were no longer an investment, pulled out that file, and repurposed your own childhood to sort you? Until next time, keep diving deep.